Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this drizzly day. My name is Sohini Ramachandran. I'm the founding director of the Data Science Institute and Herman C. Bumpus Professor of Biology here at Brown University. Along with my colleague, Suresh Venkatasubramanian, interim director of the Data Science Institute and professor of computer science and of the humanities, I'm delighted to welcome you to today's discussion of the data science behind the Marriage Pact with its founder and CEO, Liam McGregor. Central to our mission at DSI is thinking about how data generation, governance, and analysis can be used to improve lives. And our public talks have featured innovative thinkers aligned with our mission, including Pulitzer Prize-winning data journalist Mona Chalabi, mathematician Moon Duchin, who is actively involved in studying the mathematics of redistricting, and author and Brown alumnus Brian Christian, who has written a best-selling series of books about the human implications of computer science. Today, our speaker, Liam McGregor, has developed a platform addressing a misalignment that affects our everyday well-being. That social media technologies are invested in keeping us on platform, which reduces our time to have meaningful social interactions. Both Liam and the Marriage Pact are instead thinking about how to use data to foster genuine, meaningful relationships. The Marriage Pact is a campus-wide matchmaking event where undergrads discover the name of their optimal marital backup plan out of everyone participating on their campus. The first Brown Marriage Pact took place earlier this month, distributing results to more than 3,000 students. But these were only the most recent participants among 600,000 at 100 schools across the country. Liam stewarded this college tradition in its rise from his dorm room to 100 campuses across the United States. His work has been covered in more than 200 news articles, from the Today Show to the New York Times. Along the way, his team has launched viral apps that exploded across college campuses, published viral videos garnering more than 50 million views, and raised over $5 million in funding. He's even responsible for 9 known marriages thus far. Before this, Liam was on the early team at Luminar Technologies, a self-driving car company that he helped scale from $80 million to $800 million. And that was before he finished his college degree. And he worked in data science at Microsoft. He graduated from Stanford University, where he studied computer science and economics. So please join me in welcoming Liam McGregor to share insights into the data science behind the Marriage Pact and what lessons it has uncovered about love, going viral, and human nature along the way.
Thank you so much, Sohini. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the talk. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
Great.
There we go. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for being here. I know it's raining, and amongst other things, you could do anything with your time. And so I really appreciate that you chose to take an hour out of your day to come and talk about some of these topics that I find so interesting. I guess, can I just get a little sense of the audience? Because I know there's some grad students, there's some undergrads, there's some community members. Who here, I guess, is a grad student? Okay, let's go. Who here is an undergrad? Oh, okay. Who here did the Marriage Pact? Oh, yeah, okay, here we go. Yeah, so 40% of all undergrads did the Brown Marriage Pact just a couple weeks ago, but we'll get into that in a second. If you haven't yet done so, we are going to do basically a live demonstration of the Marriage Pact just in this room. And there'll be a little reception afterwards, and so if you want to hang out and meet your match, you're welcome to do so. It is platonic matching, it is age-based, but it'll be a good time. So if you want to basically experience some of the things that we talk about today, and you didn't get a chance to do the Brown Marriage Pact, this is your moment. Okay, let's start with a warm-up. I am very, very curious for you guys to take a look at this chart. There's this chart that goes viral every year or so. Who here has seen this chart? Okay, interesting. This is a fun survey. It was done I'll leave it to you to decide if you think it's fun or not. But this is work done by Stanford sociologist Michael Rosenfeld, I think. And it shows the long-term trends of how couples meet in the United States. But there is a mistake in this popular chart. There is something wrong. Can you turn to your neighbor and discuss for 10 seconds, what do you think is maybe wrong with this chart? Or what is surprising about this chart? Okay, so there is something wrong. There is something wrong in this chart. And this chart beguiled me for a long time because it violated something that I thought, it violated an expectation of mine, right? I looked at this chart and I said, that's surprising. And it's not the growth of online dating, which to me is not so surprising, with first the rise of, the internet, and then with mobile apps. But I looked into the paper and I discovered this. And it said, the chart's apparent post-2010 rise in meeting through bars and restaurants is due entirely to couples who first meet online and then meet up at a bar or restaurant. Now, that is a peculiar choice in my mind to show the data that way, right? Now, it is true that you can meet multiple ways. You can meet through, if you meet your partner and they are your coworker's sister, for example, then, you met both through family and through work, right? So it's very fair to say that, hey, maybe there are multiple causes, but this chart doesn't really look like that. It actually looks more like this. For better or for worse, and many of the comments online say for worse, the rise of online dating has been absolutely gigantic, and there is nothing standing in its way. So in any case, our lives are being reorganized around technology, even in our dating lives. And yet, looking at the data, you really have to, go back to how the data was constructed to understand what you're looking at, right? And what we'll look at today is the underlying data, and both how you capture data to do something, how you go out and get data to, say, organize a real-life data science project, and then, of course, some of the interesting things you can learn along the way. So, yes, the Brown Marriage Pact happened just a few weeks ago, and I guess many of the people in this room participated. Thank you guys so much. I hope you had a good time. It was crazy. It was 3,000 submissions, which was 40% of everyone on campus, which is crazy. It's very rare that this many people do anything together. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But thank you to all those who participated. Brown is number 102 or 105 or something out of more than 100 colleges around the country who have had a marriage pact. And there's about 60 or 70 that have a strong annual tradition of the marriage pact. And there's been more than 600,000 participants over time. And perhaps some of you might have experienced something like this a few weeks ago. But these are the kinds of experiences that come from, getting your marriage pact match, which I think is so funny. One of these girls got her brother. She's the third one that's getting pushed over by her friends. In any case, welcome, guys, to the making of the Marriage Pact. I really appreciate you guys being here. Today, we're going to look at some of the underlying tools and, the original story of how we made the Marriage Pact and what we've learned along the way. And my hope is that you can use what you learn here today to either do great data science or just to understand how an understanding of data can improve your life. So, let's dive in. Back to the beginning. I want to give you the original story. This is back in fall of 2017. This was my sophomore year in college. And I had just come back from working on that self-driving car company. And this was sort of what I was doing. I was glad I was able to find pictures of class. But there were pictures of whiteboards, so there we go. So in any case, yeah, it's me with my friends. I was doing a cappella, but really, I was kind of disinterested in homework, to be honest. I think coming back to school, I sort of said, these problems where everybody gets the same answer are less interesting to me than doing novel work. And so I said, how could I be doing things that other people aren't doing? Of course, there is value to learning, and I encourage you to do your homework. But that was my question. And so I was going through the course catalog, and there was this one class that stood out that looked kind of interesting. It was called Econ 136, Market Design. Basically, there's this game theory suggests that, hey, I have a game, and what is my optimal strategy given what other people are going to do in this game? Market design is the flip side of that coin, where it sort of says, hey, given a bunch of players, how should I design the game such that everybody gets a good outcome? And so I thought, hey, market design sounds cool. And so I emailed the professor. I said, hey, I don't have any of the prerequisites, but could I perhaps participate in the class? And the professor was sort of like, maybe. And so I said, great, I'll come tomorrow, and we'll have a good time. So I threw myself in, and the class was a lot of fun. And at the end of the class, we were supposed to write a final paper. And God, I did not want to write that final paper. And so I went to the professor. I said, hey, instead of writing a final paper, could I do a project instead? And instead of doing it solo, could I bring in my friend? And could I? And anyways, the professor was kind of like, okay, let's see it. To the professor's credit. And I had recently seen this post on Reddit, which was, hey, did anybody ever go through with a marriage pact? Like if we're not married by 30, we'll marry each other sort of thing. How did it work out? And I was like, that's crazy. I'd never heard of a marriage pact before, but I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. The idea of sitting down with a friend and saying, hey, if we both turn 40, let's just settle. I was like, that's crazy. The most important decision in your life, probably 10 times more important than any other decision you make, say career or anything else. And you're just going to say, hey, yeah, this friend who I happen to know, YOLO, So I was like, okay, what are the odds that this person is the right person for you? Not high, not high. But at a place like Brown, right, there's thousands of students at Brown. There might not be Prince Charming, but is there somebody who's good enough? Like 10 years from now, you were really focused on your career, you look up from your cubicle, and you're like, maybe I should have met someone at Brown. That it is possible. There is more than one person to whom that will happen. And so I was like, hey, could we find that person for you? Not Prince Charming, but someone who would give you a great 50 years. If they had to. So I said, let's try and find that person. So here's what we did. We put together a little flyer, and we were like, hey, let's just read this for a second. Finding a life partner is probably not a priority right now. It isn't for many undergrads. But like many busy individuals, years from now, you may realize that the most viable booze are already gone. At that point, it's less about finding the one and more about the last one left. The Stanford Marriage Pact at the time is here to cover the essentials. We know you have your non-negotiables. We know you're busy. We also know Al Roth's Nobel Prize-winning deferred acceptance algorithm, which we stopped using the next year, and a little linear algebra. We've used this to build the best and only way for finding your optimal marital backup plan. If you participate in the Brown Marriage Pact, you might recognize this. This flyer is very similar, actually, still today. We've really tried to make it less words and different, but it's just really fun. And this is what it looked like at the time, a little different. Got backup plans. And it asked these questions, and the questions were about your values deep down, and sort of how you see your life playing out. And so, for example, this question, you might agree or disagree with it. You might have a strong reaction. That's exactly the point, because if you are on a very different playing field as your partner, or if you're saying, "Hey, strongly disagree," right, and your partner says, "Strongly agree," right, you might have some issues about how you raise your children. And so we asked at the time 38 or 39 questions like this. And we sent it out. And I was really worried that nobody would do this, because this is functionally a class survey, right? This is a 50-question class survey. Have you guys ever sent out a class survey yourselves? Have you guys ever seen a class survey in your inbox? Have you ever not taken the class survey that showed up in your inbox? Yeah, so I was really worried. I was like, because if we only get 15 people to answer, to participate in this, the matches are going to be bad. We could have invented the best matching algorithm on the planet, and your best match out of 15 people is simply not going to be good. And so I was like, gosh, how do we get people to sign up for this? Well, we sent this out, and in the first hour, I think 40 people signed up, and I said, we're going to make it to 100. And that was big. That was big for us. But then the next hour, actually, even more people signed up. And by the end of the day, 1,000 people had signed up. And the next day, another 1,000 people signed up. And by the end of the week, 4,111 unique verified Stanford undergraduates had signed up. And this is what it looked like when the results came out. Basically, everybody was huddled in their rooms, and you could tell the results were coming out. You only knew it was tonight, but you were huddled up in your room, and you could hear screaming through the cinder block walls. And that's how you knew that they were getting their matches. And then slowly but surely, one by one, the people in the room, in your room, would start getting their matches, and they'd start screaming and say, who did you get? Who did you get? And it was pandemonium. People were running up and down the halls. It was crazy. And there was all kinds of things. At the time, this is before side chat. And so there were Facebook meme pages. But there were all kinds of Facebook memes about this. There's someone at Y Combinator's job is to read the Stanford Daily every day, I guess, and so they emailed us. And it was crazy. CS 106B is a popular computer science class. They made a final question about it. And what's fun is that it's not just about getting a great match. It's also about the stories that come from it, right? Everybody knows somebody who matched with their ex, or somebody who matched their TA, right? Or somebody who viewed your LinkedIn before you got to update your photo, I love that Venmo one. Honestly, I'm so bummed that I didn't think of that. But that's good fun. Actually, I know the guy now. His name's Carlo. He's great. And so in any case, 4,111 people signed up, which is 58% of everyone on campus, which is crazy. This is what a typical sign-up chart will look like. This was actually the next year, and you can see that we waited until 10 p.m. to send it out because we were still working on it, which was a total mistake. But 1,700 people signed up in 2 hours the next year. And in any case, and Aspen from the Data Science Institute, that was her first year doing it, and she said it felt like it had always been around. But it's crazy. I said that 58% of people rarely, or 40% of people rarely do anything. But I want to put this in perspective, right? 34% of people at the time had college degrees. 41% participate in the future of their democracy in midterm elections. And really only 57% for the last century have participated in presidential elections, which is why I was so confused that 58% of people had done the Stanford Marriage Pact. I was like, how did this happen? Either amazing for Marriage Pact or dire for democracy, or both. So in any case, how do we do this? This is the question. And we're going to unpack this today. And hopefully I give you some tools that you can use to do your own projects. And so in any case, chapter 2, how to think about the data you get. This is most often overlooked and not covered in school. In school, when you get a data set, you often have the whole thing cleaned up, handed to you, and it's ready to use, and there's a correct answer that you can get from the data set, especially in your undergraduate degree. But in real life, the data isn't collected for you. And in our case, of course, there's the perilous issue of, hey, if nobody signs up, then we can't make good matches. And so how do we think about going about and getting that data? Well, why use a questionnaire? Let's start here. The first thing is that you're an imperfect evaluator, right? You don't know, in this problem space, right, thinking about who will give you a great 50 years, you don't know who will give you a great 50 years. You can't look at someone and say, yes, that 50 years would be great, and no, those 50 years would not, right? It's a little bit different than a short-term relationship app, for example. And so you might be bad at reading people, but you know yourself well. And so he said, okay, let's ask people about themselves. We will do the comparisons, and we will judge between the two of you at scale for thousands of people at once, or at least hundreds, how good they are. And I said, hey, Mom, what matters in long-term relationships? And she said, values. And that was good enough to get started. And so we asked about 50 questions over time about who you are deep down. And so here's what we ask about. We ask about your values, your worldview, and your beliefs. And if you took the Marriage Pact, or if you took the questionnaire just now, you'll probably notice that conspicuously absent were things like, hey, what music do you listen to? Or what's your favorite sport? Or what's your favorite ice cream flavor? And the truth is that those topics of conversation, while comprising the majority of most first dates, are not really important for any kind of relationship formation other than learning about each other. In fact, for predicting long-term relationships, they are not useful. For example, my girlfriend sitting in the front row listens to the Jonas Brothers, and that's amazing. I don't listen to Jonas Brothers, not because they aren't good. I just don't listen to them. But I'll be happy to go to a concert with her because I enjoy spending time with her. And so we didn't need to ask on the questionnaire, hey, do you like the Jonas Brothers, right? Because that's not so important for long-term relationship formation. What's more is when you're collecting data, it's really important you know how it was collected, right? What's amazing, this insight came out about 15 years ago. They looked at OkCupid, which was a dating site, and they said, wow, only tall people date on OkCupid. Isn't that amazing? That's truly amazing. So amazing as to really stretch credulity. But in any case, no, that's not true, right? The truth is that in online dating, there's very strong positive selection for height in men, and so your strategy is to add about 2 inches to your height. If you're 5'10", you say you're 6 feet. If you're 6 feet, you actually cannot say that you're 6 feet tall. You must say that you're 6'1", because if you just say that you're 6 feet, they'll think you're 5'10". Right? And so there's this whole strategy that goes on. And just like at the beginning, it's important when you look at your data sets to know how they're captured, because you might look at this and say, wow, OkCupid attracts really tall people. But they looked at this in other places too. It's not just height, although it plagues dating apps. It's also photos, right? When you select your photos for a dating app, you kind of look back and say, hey, what are my best photos? And OkCupid let people rate other people's photos. And what they learned was that hot photos are twice as likely to be more than 2 years old. Or say the 20th percentile here, look at this. The 20th percentile regular photo is about 1 year old, but the 20th percentile hot photo was 2 years old. And so in any case, there's all this strategizing that goes on, especially when you answer questions, and especially in a dating context. But this happens all the time. This happens in political surveys too, right? This is why there are big election forecast misses over the last few years. And so when we ask questions, we think, hey, what kinds of questions should we ask? And a lot of people ask us, hey, add this question, add this question. And one question you might ask is, hey, how funny are you, right? Because, hey, humor matters in relationships. Hey, he makes me laugh, right? That's an important thing. But if you look at this question and then you have people actually answer it, here's what happens. I'm hilarious, of course, because they think, hey, I would probably get a better match if I'm hilarious than if I'm not hilarious. So I'm going to say I'm hilarious so I can get a better match. And I don't fault anybody for lying on a questionnaire. It's just a questionnaire. Economists call this strategizing, though, so it's a little bit polite. And this happens all the time, right? Same question. If we asked how attractive you were, right? And I've seen this on, people make knockoff marriage pacts sometimes. They'll go add this question, and I'll tell them why they shouldn't right now. Because instead of I'm a 10 out of 10, really people are interpreting this as I'm super handsome, right? You should match me with other very beautiful people. And yeah, so you choose 7. So looking at real marriage pact questions, this is a little bit of a vibe shift. Sorry. But if you look at this question, one thing I love about this question is that you can't get a better outcome by misrepresenting your position, right? You can't strategize on this question. Right? Say you don't like guns. You're not going to get a better outcome by saying, I love guns. I would love to put a gun in the house, right? You're probably going to get a worse outcome. And similarly, if you are part of that culture and you love guns and that's part of what you want your lifestyle to be, if you said, I would not keep a gun in the house, you know what kind of match you're going to get and you're not going to like it. And similarly, this one, right? I'm open to being in a non-monogamous relationship. We added this one after a few years because we realized that there were people to whom this is important. And if you lie about your answer on this question, you better be willing to, walk the walk. Is basically, if you're going to put a different position than your true one. And so when we think about writing questions, one very important thing we think about is strategy proofness. And this comes from economics, but I think it applies heavily in data science, right? Because the question is, how do we make sure that the data we're gathering is real, right? And most of the time, you don't know, right? If you look at that chart of heights, you don't know what's real or not, except, they had enough people and they sort of said, okay, this is probably not true, right? But when you're looking at data, how do you know it's real? And as an economist, I like to think, what are the incentives? What are the incentives in gathering the data? And if the incentives are pure and there is no possible incentive to deviate from the truth, then you're in a good place. So, considerations when collecting data, that's the first one. We want strategy proofness, so you can get actual data here, right? Second one, we're talking about getting a lot of data, and then finally, getting information out of the data. So it matters how many people do it. And this is obvious for marriage pact, but this is also true about, frankly, any data that you'd like to collect. And so we put a lot of time and effort into making it low friction. Who here has heard about friction before, not in the physics sense, but in the product design sense? Okay, about half of people. Yeah, so basically making it very low friction means making it very easy to use, making it not hard. For example, if we asked a bunch of these 1 to 7 questions, then we asked for a 5-paragraph essay about what you were looking for in your match, a lot of people would say, okay, at this point, I'm going to shut this and come back to it. And by come back to it, they mean never come back to it. And so we looked at, hey, let's not make an app. Let's just make it a website, right? Hey, let's ask very easy to answer questions, right? Ones where you don't have to think very hard about your answer because you can't misreport and get a better answer. We also thought about the questionnaire length. The first year was 39 questions, and then over time we saw, okay, people like it, so I guess we can ask more questions. And we also said, hey, these have been 1 to 7 questions, but the very first year I was like, 7. 7 things to decide between. I was like, that's a lot. I was like, maybe we should just go with 5 so people have an easier time. Fortunately, a lot of people signed up, so we were able to make it 7. So that's getting a lot of data. How much information is being revealed? This is an interesting question that I think is not often covered, but I like this one because if everyone answered 7, how much information would we have captured with this question, right? If this was the question we asked, and this was the distribution that we got, wow, everybody at Brown is handsome. That's amazing. How much information would we have really gotten? And the answer is none. We have revealed absolutely no new information through the collection of this data, right? And that was a contrived question, but this is a real question. We asked this one, I think, the second year in 2018. And this is what happened. Everyone's like, some people were like, oh, no, yes. And then almost half the people were like, what? And so we sort of threw out that question because we're like, all those people in the middle, we have no idea who they are and what distinguishes them from each other. And so questions we like have more even distributions like this, right? This is one of our best questions, so to speak, because it's both important and it has an incredibly even distribution, right? We have learned a lot about what distinguishes people, right? Because people could fall into many different buckets here. And similarly, what about a question where everybody answers 1 and 7? This is a fun question. There's actually not many questions like this. You like to think sometimes people are bimodal. The truth is people are very normally distributed. And so it's very challenging for us to ask questions where people are really split on them. But I was preparing for this talk, I was looking through all of our questions, and we've thought of 10,000 questions over the years, and we've only published 2,000. And I found this question, and that was this one. Answer number 1, because we said so. And so people were kind of split on this one. I love the people who are neutral, right? They're like, oh, neutral, I can go either way, right? Or like 2, they're like, almost 1, in any case. So how much information is being revealed? Data scientists sometimes think about information as being found in groups of questions that have high variance in a data set. And we'll come back to that in a minute. Intuitively, we say, is this question helping us tell people apart, right? Are the important differences between people being revealed? And so that's what we're doing with our questions. Functionally, we think about, hey, is this important and balanced, right? Is it strategy proof, et cetera? Functionally, if you guys want to do it at home, you can measure the importance of the question times the Gini coefficient, which is a subject from economics. So in any case, these are questions that I propose you consider when you're thinking about collecting data. OK, part 3. Enough of that stuff for now. Let's get back to the story. So what happened? Well, it blew up. And it was really crazy to see so many people doing it. And it was crazy to get these messages and to see the memes and to see the news article, the first news article that I'd been in. I was like, wow, that's crazy. And what was kind of interesting was that I designed it at the time to go viral, right? Which it fortunately did. But what I didn't know was that I designed it in a way that would go viral time and time and time again. And so what happened was in 2017, we did it at one school. 2018, we did it at Stanford. 2019, we did it at Stanford. And then I graduated, and I was like, hey, actually, let's take this show on the road. And so in fall of 2020, there were 7 schools. And then 2021 spring, it really blew up. So here's what it looked like. We were off to the races. And today, there have been more than 600,000 people that have done this experience, right? Just like you guys, and more than 100 schools. And it's been covered in all kinds of news articles, I guess, as Suhini mentioned, which has been really, really crazy to see. This is so fun. And beyond, a side chat, there's been chatter sort of publicly and everywhere about this sort of stuff. And here are the results. We followed up 1 year later after the Stanford Marriage Pact, and now we've done this since at many schools. We say, hey, what happened with your match? We matched you with Steve, and what happened to Steve? And what we found out was that 50% of matches meet up in person. No, 50% of matches have a conversation. 30% of matches meet up in person. And if you meet up in person, you have an 11% chance of still dating them 1 year later, which is actually kind of crazy because on traditional dating apps, only 1 to 2% of matches, period, meet up. And so you have a 15 to 30 times higher chance of meeting up with your Marriage Pact match than you have with meeting up with a match through a dating app. And you're more likely to date your Marriage Pact match for a year or longer than you are to meet up with any match from a dating app. That's crazy. In any case, I love the stories. I love the stories. We got this one from a guy at Northwestern. And I was like, I read the preview of this email, and I was like, what is going to happen in this email? But yeah, he's like, hey, I'm 98% sure I'm going to match with Leah, and I know this because I'm hooking up with her twin sister, who just told me that Leah got the initials PT, which are mine. Please, just anyone else. Man, he did make it. He did make it. He gave the twin sister his number. But it's not just the funny stories, it's also the heartwarming ones. I got this email that said, thank you. And these two girls matched, and she said, hey, my match fell asleep on my arm while we were working at the library. And I thought that was so sweet. And this is Alden talking about Kira. Look at that. They were just studying together, and that was how close they'd become. And actually, they sent us more pictures, and so that was their first date on the far left. Then Kira went to Alden went to Kira's a cappella show, and then she met the parents and met their 8 cats or something like that. And then she was reading sections from her diary. I thought that was crazy. That's very intimate. And so in any case, when we look at these numbers, to me, this is impact, right? This is real people's lives. And looking at that story of Kira and Alden, that's life. Right? That's life happening. So in any case, I think this is kind of fun. I want to mention this before we get into the insights. How do we use data for good? This is really important to me. I TA'd a CS and ethics class in undergrad. It's a really just fun and interesting subject, but it's also very important. And so there are a few things that I believe are very important in our work. Number one is only do with the data what you say you're going to do with it. For example, we say we're going to not sell your data. So it's very important that we not sell your data, and we only use the data, for example, to match you and help you get better matches. That's very, very important to me. Second of all, the higher the intervention in your life, the more ethical care you should take. And so, for example, if you are designing a platform and you're going to use data science to decide who should get loans or not, you should probably take a little more care than, say, if you're designing a silly little thing to, I don't know, a silly little thing, frankly, right? Finally, again, because I'm an economist and I love those incentives, it's very important to choose a business model that helps you do the right thing, right? We'll talk about this at the end, but basically we make money by selling software to people that helps them get a better outcome, right? It's very simple. You pay us money and we give you software that helps you have a good time, and that's all. And so that's very important. So I believe your data should serve you. I think that's really important. Finally, if you disagree with me, that's fair, and you can delete your data at any time. If you're a Brown student, this is how you do it. So if you want to take a photo, you're welcome to do it. It's not that hard to remember either, and it's on our website. So we've talked about what data we collect. We've talked about the stories behind it. What is in the data, right? What have we learned? What have we seen? Well, let's dive into it in part 4, findings. And this is going to include a sneak preview of something that's going to come to Brown in the next couple months, which is the Brown Campus Report. We make these, and this is going to come out in a few weeks, so you get the pre-release version. And basically, this gives you a little look into the Brown community. And so we're going to talk about what we've found in the Brown data set. So here is the first thing. This is everybody at Brown who signed up. And what we can see is that Brown does a very good job helping you get into a relationship. In fact, you're 2 times more likely to be in a relationship leaving Brown than you were when you started Brown. I think that's kind of fun, you know? Some schools are better than others, actually. Some schools don't do a very good job helping you find someone. Some schools do a great job. I was very curious about which were the smartest concentrations at Brown, right? So we had a question, I'm smarter than most people at Brown, and we ranked them. So here is who are the smartest people at Brown. Isn't that amazing? God, those biophysics students, they're so smart. They're so smart. But I wasn't just curious about who the smartest majors were, or the smartest concentration. I was also curious, what's the easiest concentration? I don't know if you guys were a freshman and you said, hey, what's the easiest concentration that I could take? And so we looked at that too. We said, hey, what's the easiest concentration? And so this is your preference for kinky sex by what major, by what concentration you are. Isn't that amazing? I think chemistry ranks on both charts. No, okay. Computer science, biology, electrical engineering. It's very interesting. Different engineering and science disciplines are very different. But we look at other things. For example, like what's the difference between men and women, right? And so this is, for example, I would end a friendship over differing political views, men versus women, and I find politically incorrect humor funny, men versus women. And this is actually, we see this all over. This is true just simply about men versus women, not just at Brown. This is at every school, where men are significantly more likely to find politically incorrect humor funny, and women are significantly more likely to end a friendship over it, which I find interesting. There's more than that, though. There's also more sensitive things. I like to be worshipped by my partner, or I generally like to take control during sex. And you can see that there are perhaps expected differences between different groups of people. Of course, these are statements about populations, not about individuals, right? So if you meet a woman, you can't say, oh, okay, you believe this, right? But in any case, here we go. This is also interesting for men and women. We looked at gender and sexuality. And there are many headlines where they're like, oh, 1/6 of Gen Z is queer, or something like that. And we've been running the survey for 8 years, and so we actually, we have that data, and this is what it is. And this is actually true just about everywhere as well, although different schools select for conservative or liberal communities a little bit differently, and so that affects things. But about 1 in 3 women is queer at Brown, which is higher than it has been in recent years. And 1 in 4 men at Brown is queer as well. But we see also is that socialization plays a factor, right? Because 2/3 of queer men identify as gay, whereas 2/3 of queer women identify as bi. I thought that was very interesting. That's been true since 2017. When you want to compare people, or multiple types of people, you can do it this way with a heat map. I like these. How long do you think it's appropriate to wait before having sex in a relationship? And you can see that, well, in different religions, they carry these different values, right? And you can see it in their teachings and in their views and their values. There's also this one. We let you opt out or state a preference to opt out of matching with people of different political affiliations, and this is what that chart looks like. You can see that 63% of socialists wouldn't date a Republican. They also they're like, if you're apolitical, they're like, that's suspicious. They're like, if you're not with us, you're against us. But it is interesting that it is more in one direction than another. It is true that perhaps on college campuses, minority or majority status probably affects this. But in any case, what's interesting is that Marriage Pact is in many ways actually accidentally a long-running political survey. Right? For 8 years, we've measured at Stanford every fall the breakdown of campus political affiliations. And so what you can see is that after 2020 and continuing into fall of 2021, that was the rise of socialism, right? I was very surprised when socialism hit 5.6%, I remember in 2019. And then I was no longer surprised when it hit 11% in 2021. But this happens. There are many charts actually that say that in 2021 we hit peak woke, I think. And I mean, I guess, yeah, data suggests that's true. You can also see that more recently in the rise of conservatism again, although it's still relatively small. Let's look at everybody who does the Marriage Pact. This is hard, right? We've been looking at categories of people because that's easier. And so when we're trying to look at everybody, how do you do that? Well, there's this principle called dimensionality reduction, where you can take, I guess, many dimensions. You can think of each question as a dimension. And you can condense them into a smaller set of dimensions to try and look at them. And basically, at its essence, all data sets are kind of oblong. They're kind of shaped like a pancake, where some questions correlate with other questions. And so what you can do is you can basically point vectors in the direction of that covariance, and then ultimately just sort of rotate it around and take the projection onto those vectors. And you can look at the data in that way. And this 2D representation is a little simple, but we did this. And this is, for example, Stanford back in 2018 when I did it. And actually, there's me. You can see me right there. And so the principal component 1 and principal component 2, these are both baskets of questions. And here's what happens when you look at it. And here they are colored by, I guess, sexuality and by political affiliation. Right? And already you can sort of start looking at this and see, OK, there's something happening here. Right? And what is happening here? Well, we can look at what questions in what proportions comprise the different principal components. And here they are. And what we can see is that that first principal component in the top section there is basically political subjects. Right? Gender roles exist for a good reason, puts you on the right. I'm comfortable with my child being gay, puts you on the left. Social activism is important to you, puts you on the left, right? Preferring politically incorrect humor puts you on the right. And you can see that that lines up with how people claim they are politically affiliated, right? You can see that there are some people who state they're Democrats and yet they are firmly on the right-hand side of this chart, and vice versa, right? People contain multitudes. But it's very interesting to look at people this way, and this is one way that you can look at absolutely everybody. Why do the political questions comprise the most significant differences between us? I think is an interesting question when I saw this chart, right? I think there's two reasons. One is that, these are very salient topics, right? And so these are always in the news, and so you know your opinion on these, and you tend to have a stronger opinion on them. The other reason is a little bit more cynical, but the function of political parties is to find constituents, right? And so a political party has it in its interest to adopt things that people feel strongly about as part of their platform to gain your vote. So, interesting stuff. All right, this is our last section before we head into conversation. But predicting the quality of matches. This is, in my view, the most interesting question that we look at Marriage Pact, right? Which is at the end of the day, taking your responses and someone else's responses, can we determine how good of a match you would be with anyone on your campus? Let's look at it. And in this section, I'm going to show you how data science that we've been talking about can help you do science, which means contribute new knowledge, right? And share it with the world. So here's what we're going to do a little bit of that. In relationship science, there are some things that are very well studied. And those are things like communication and behavior, right? There are plenty of books about how to help your relationship do better through more communication and better behavior, like avoiding stonewalling, for example. They focus on action that you take during a relationship, and that's a lot of the focus of clinical psych. They also focus on personality traits. Those are very, very well studied. There are famous inventories on them, like Ocean and Big Five. Not well studied are how the properties of people make you more or less likely to have a good relationship with them. But yet, this is a very interesting question because anybody you meet when you're single in college, for example, could be someone good for you. And so how do you know if they're good for you or not? Well, this is sort of the hole in relationship science. And it's not because nobody is interested in the subject. I think it's instead because it's very difficult to study. If you look at this, you can sort of think of data in two terms. There's the quality of the data that you're getting, and there's the quantity, or the scale of the data that you're getting. And if you look at clinical psych, they'll invite couples into a lab, and they'll study them from having a conversation from behind a one-way mirror, and they will know everything about this couple. And that is quality of data, right? But it's not quantity, right? Similarly, dating apps have incredible quantities of data, right? They have like 10 billion swipes, right? But it's just a swipe, and you don't really know anything about those people deep down. And so we have this sort of frontier of knowledge in especially the dating space. And I'm really excited that Marriage Pact is pushing that frontier. The quality is probably not as good as clinical psych, and the scale is not as high as dating apps, right? But I think we can contribute some new knowledge. So here's what we found. And remember that we ask these values-based questions 1 to 7, such as, I need to be famous, do you agree or disagree, right? Or, again, this one, I would keep a gun in the house, agree or disagree. And it's important that these questions be strategy-proof, so we know what we're doing. Well, predicting the outcomes, there are 3 different ways to do it, and I'll take you briefly through each one. You can ask relationship scientists, you can ask the people, or you can look at the data. And so here are some questions. Here are some example questions that we field, and these have been fielded many times, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times. I would consider my friends quiet, or gender roles exist for a good reason, or of course, do you prefer politically incorrect humor? That third from bottom one is, would you be okay if you spent your life doing good for others but did not receive recognition for it? And that second to last one is, there's a place for revenge when someone has wronged me. And so we asked. We hired a team of relationship scientists, and they work with us today, and they do a lot of this work that we're talking about right now. We said, hey, how important is each of these questions? And they told us. They said, okay, we did a wall-to-wall relationship science literature review. We read hundreds and hundreds of studies that have been published, and here is what the literature suggests. These different questions are important. But, of course, why don't we let the participants decide, right? Why sit in our ivory tower when we could go and ask people how important these are? Well, remember friction, right? Ideally, we would just ask them, hey, okay, what's your response to this question? Okay, how important is it? But that would double the length of the questionnaire, and so we have to be a little bit smarter than that. And so we devised this system where we ask you for a level set of the questions that's more important to you. And basically, we recommend choosing 3 to 5. And we do this at some schools. And it's a little technical how we do it, but basically the idea is that this lets people who are very opinionated about one thing express a very strong opinion and have that thing be weighted more importantly than anybody who's expressing many things. People who express many things, though, are probably in general more opinionated total, although less opinion about each given thing. And so we looked at the votes, and here's what they suggest. Here's how important these questions are according to the votes. Now, the voting mechanism is a little bit imperfect, but of course each of these methods is a little bit imperfect. And you can see that people focus a lot on things that are either salient, right, or things that are immediately important. I think I want a family with X children. People were like, oh, I'm not thinking about that right now, right? Or revenge. They were like, man, that's a little esoteric. I don't want revenge. There's one final way, which is you can predict it using the outcome data, right? And so what we did was we fielded that survey 1 year later, and we asked people, hey, how good was your match? What happened? And here are those sorts of questions. We say, hey, like, did you meet up? How many times did you meet up? Who messaged first, et cetera? And we had our prediction for how good the match was. And then we looked at how good it actually was. And here's how important each question was for these different outcomes. We looked at meeting up. We looked at overall ratings. We looked at the probability of forming a substantive relationship, which was way too long for a label. So just remember that's what RSHIP stands for. And here's what we found. I think there's a couple interesting things here, right? Number one, different things matter at different times in a relationship, right? Number two, I think it's fun that at the end of the day, looking down those things that form a substantive relationship, a lot of these things are more about your values, right? Doing good for others without recognition, at least being on the same page about it, right? Being on the same page about turning the other cheek or not, you know? These are values that are sometimes adopted by religion, and it turns out that these are some of the most important things for having a successful long-term relationship with someone. I thought that was really interesting. And so ultimately we can compare them. We can see that we got kind of different answers, right? Ultimately, right now we use a mixture of these 3 different approaches to inform how important different questions are. And there are a few other things besides that we use that are good fun, but those are beyond the scope of the conversation. Okay, finally, zooming out. We went from sophomore year, right? That cold email where I might have just not taken the class, right? To more than 100 schools and 600,000 people. And real engagements and real marriages as a result, right? That's Sean on the left. He's my friend now. He actually put $25,000 into the company through an investor. That's Maxwell and Malia. They own a house together. That's crazy. And that's Maylon and Preston. And Maylon actually dropped out of school to join our team, which is amazing. I'm a big fan of hers. And so in any case, people come out of it, you know, it's not just about the engagements, although those are fun. It's also about the stories, right? In my mind, this is the fun that comes out of it. Everybody gets a story. And of course, you go through it with your friends. And at the end of the day, regardless of what happened with a match, these are core memories that you get for the rest of your life. And so we're not stopping here. We've recently made Marriage Pact available outside of colleges. That's not called the Marriage Pact, it's called Matchbox. And that's what we're doing here today. And I'm going to release the matches at the end of the Q&A. That'll be good fun. But ultimately, I think we'll help more people around the world make these genuine connections and go through fun experiences with their friends. And what's fun about that is that that funds directly the work of the Marriage Pact, right? So we don't have to charge for the Marriage Pact. We don't have to do anything crazy. We can just sell a good product, right? And this is what it looks like. There have been hundreds of these events now in more than 100 cities around the world, all 6 populated continents, 40 countries. And this is what they look like in New York, at least. And so if you're ever down in New York, we'd love to have you at one. If you would like to run your own Marriage Pact for your own community, you can do that too. And I'll give you a student discount. In any case, looking at this chart, I think it's easy to look at the next 10 years and say, wow, this is dire. My hope is that instead, the next 10 years will fulfill the promise of letting you use your data and tools to live a better life, right? We're building those tools at Marriage Pact. We're conducting the relationship science to figure it out. And my hope is that we will help you have a more meaningful life through your relationships. So, thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I would love to welcome to the stage back Sohini. Do you have your microphone? Here we go. Here's a microphone. Here we go. And if you haven't yet done so, that's the QR code. Thank you, Aspen.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much. That was super, that was a lot of fun. My husband's here, so it was fun for us to think about our own relationship. Which I guess, okay, so my husband and I will celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary in May.
Congratulations.
Thank you. When I think back, I would say what made our first date different from other first dates I'd been on at the time, we met through a mutual friend, is that we did talk a lot about values. We talked a lot about our aging parents, and we talked about kids, and so that definitely resonates with me. And I think the last vignette you had about what might change over time, because we were sort of post-grad school at the time, is really interesting. But I wanted to talk a little bit about longitudinal changes in data that you've seen in the Marriage Pact, because you you started, and then things really took off in the pandemic and post. And I'm wondering what we're learning about college-age students in that time period. So how have things changed in data from the Marriage Pact post-pandemic? And also, what do you think is changing and what that sector of our population values?
Yeah, this is really interesting. What's interesting is that our values are relatively deep down, and so our values change less over time than I expected, to be honest. And part of it is that we're measuring a snapshot of college-age values every year versus individual people's values, which I think tend to be a little bit more set. There are interesting things we've seen over time. For example, we have this question, I always vote, right? Which is funny because that answer changes over time. And for example, that had an all-time high around fall of 2020, where voting was very important. And then it was less important over the next few years. And people are like, oh, no, I don't always vote anymore. And so that was, for example, one thing that we saw. And actually, we saw that college enthusiasm in voting, for example, in fall of 2024 was much lower, a full point out of 7, for example, than it had been in the previous presidential election. And so in any case, there are some things that change and we get to see. But I think some of the more enduring things change less.
Do you look at all at individuals who have recurring engagement with the platform and
Yeah.
how their answers to questions might shift?
That is an incredible frontier for us. We get to sample 50 questions for different people. 80% of people who are able to do the Marriage Pact the next year who did it any given year. And so we do have some very interesting insights into people like that. It's a lot of work to put those data sets together and analyze them, and it's not our highest priority because we're not profitable. So we'll do that soon.
Thanks for showing us a preview of the campus report, which hasn't come out yet. I'm curious about how you think about the data that you visualize in that report, how you choose what to visualize, and you also have your Instagram feed has some really interesting visualizations where you kind of pit schools against each other, and so I'd love to hear more about how you think about those visualizations, and then maybe we'll transition to audience questions. Sure.
Yeah, it's a fun time. I mean, some of those insights are crazy, right? I mean, like the easiest majors, like your concentrations, right? The easiest concentrations, that's crazy. Or of course, the smartest ones. It's really funny what percentage of people think they're in the 99th percentile. It's more than 1% of people. I'll give you that. And so at the end of the day, I think we're trying to tell a story with that, and we're trying to educate and entertain. And so I think giving you a look into who you are, right, holding up a little mirror to Brown, for example, that's our goal with that. And so I think creating a little, telling an interesting story or finding an interesting story, that's always good fun.
So we have some time for audience questions. I have more questions, but I think your questions might be better. And we have microphones in the aisles and some folks walking around, or just come up if you want to ask a question.
There you go. Don't be shy.
Hi.
Hi there.
So I was on one of the team of 5 who were in charge of bringing Marriage Pact to Brown. For those who don't know, it involved for about 2 weeks, like 30-minute meetings almost every day where we decided, where we were going to advertise and how. Now, most of the advertising materials were made up for us. And one thing that really fascinated me is that the brand of Marriage Pact is very different from a lot of other dating apps where it's not this like happy, fun, you're going to meet the love of your life. It's kind of grim. I got to look at every single one of the posters that was in this like folder of 30, and it's really sort of like dystopian, and I think it works towards your algorithmic era, but I'm just like curious how much you guys have thought about like the branding for Marriage Pact.
Thank you. Hey, give this man a round of applause, by the way. What an incredible experience that you created. What's your name?
I'm Jeffrey.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. Right? Look what you did. Look what you did for Brown. That's amazing. That's really amazing. The branding has changed over time. I think it comes from this idea, though, that it's not really a dating app. It's not like, oh, dating apps were rough, so we made our own. Right? That's not where Marriage Pact comes from. Marriage Pact comes from this question and then this crazy answer. And it really is crazy, and it was so crazy that I didn't think anybody would do it, but then it was actually so crazy enough that it worked. And so I think, Marriage Pact is a little tongue-in-cheek, it's a little ironic, it is a little Black Mirror, and so I think we're sort of unafraid to lean into what it is, because what it is fun. And what it is discussable also. which plays an important role in going viral. A lot of people over time have tried to make it more milquetoast, or said, oh, it's about your best match on campus, that's all, right? But the reality is that it's about your optimal marital backup plan, and that's a crazier idea, and that's one that spreads further. And then ultimately results in more people doing it, which results in better matches. And so it's sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in that regard. So in any case, it's a mixture of those things. Jeffrey, thank you so much for doing the Brown Marriage Pact. Guys, one more time. Jeffrey, that's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you for a wonderful application filler. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Lara, and it's just a curiosity question. So you seem to have done this at least 3 times as a Stanford student yourself. So what were your experiences with your matches?
Yeah, it was very interesting. The first thing that she saw was my parents viewing her LinkedIn. she got view notifications from my parents. I was like, no. I was like, guys, you're on like private, LinkedIn browsing, right? They're like, what's that? I'm like, no. But she was great. Her name's Natalie. We had both done musical instruments growing up. She was interested in art history and computer science, and we hadn't asked about any of those things on the questionnaire. And yet those were things that I found, that we resonated on. I think at the end of the day, there was no spark, but I think with Marriage Pact, we leave that up to the participants. We sort of say, hey, here's someone who's, would give you a good life if you had to. Up to you to decide if you're compatible or you find each other attractive or anything like that. But that was, I think, maybe the genre of experience that I had doing it.
So that was similar with the other 2 also? Nobody felt like a marriage match?
I think they were people with whom I was like, wow, we have a lot in common, and I could see, like how this is practical and this makes sense on paper. I think I was never so attracted to them that I wanted to date them, but that's not.
How'd you meet your girlfriend?
This is Kelly, everybody. Say hi to Kelly. The old-fashioned way, believe it or not, through mutual friends at a party. Yeah. And that was before the 3rd Marriage Pact? Yeah.
Can I do one more?
Yeah, please.
So why did you think about not giving people one, match, but rank order, here's your best 8 or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been working our way through customer requests. The 3rd most common request is, hey, I got my score with my match, what's my score with my friend? And that turned into a very viral app. The 2nd most common request was, hey, can I do a marriage pact for my own community? And we just built that, so if you'd like to do that, you can. And that one has also gone very well. So the final frontier is the most common request, which is, hey, can I have more matches? And yeah, truthfully, if we've ranked absolutely everybody at Brown and you don't recognize the first name, you might be curious to know the next 10. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is that a lot of people do it and have a good time. And at the end of the day, I think more matches results in fewer people doing it and a worse time. And so it's not very high on our priority list to change the marriage pact in that way, although we might make other ways for people to get more matches.
Thanks. Really interesting presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here. That was sick. What are your thoughts on the fact that the point of the marriage pact is for a backup marriage plan, but then people are meeting at age like 18 through 21 when most of us are not interested in getting married right now?
Yeah. It's so funny. The first year, we did not think that far ahead. we were like, wow, wouldn't this be a crazy thought experiment? What if we actually did it? And then we actually did it. And then after the matches went out, I was like, wow, like we finally did it. Because by the way, there were 7 or 8 days when the questionnaire was out. And I hadn't coded it until like day 6. And so, because the first day, if only 20 people sign up, you can do that by hand. So I was like, I'm not going to program this whole thing if nobody signs up. But then like a lot of people signed up, so I actually had to code it. So then I was actually spending most of my time thinking, God, how to actually build this before the matches came out. So we had not really thought that far ahead. It is interesting. At the end of the day, I think you see it somewhat in the tension between what the relationship scientists say is important, what the data suggests is important for forming long-term relationships, and what people are voting on and what people are asking for. And so, it's funny. I think at the end of the day, I view us on the Marriage Pact team as stewards of a great experience and focusing on the things that are going to deliver the results. Sort of regardless of what people ask for, right? Henry Ford had a famous quote where he said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And instead, of course, he made the automobile. I don't think Marriage Pact is quite as disruptive as the first automobile, perhaps yet. But I hope it will be one day. And so in any case, it is interesting that people are meeting now, and that's a tension between stated purpose and actual purpose, and we have to work on that every day. I don't have an answer.
Thank you so much. And one other quick question.
Yeah.
How do you decide when to add new questions and when to take questions away?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. Yeah, we add questions all the time. We will, run into things in real life, and we have a Slack channel where we propose questions all the time, and we vote on them, and we discuss them. And we've proposed, like I said, 10,000 questions over time, and we've fielded more than 2,000, and we've removed, actually, subsequently, more than 500. So we have, 8,000 that we struck down, and we have 500 that we went back on after we, looked at the distribution or something like that. So all the time, whenever we think of a good question, we add it. But every semester, we review the questions that go to the Marriage Pact specifically. And there's a common set of questions that everybody get that we know are important. But then, of course, there are questions that Jeffrey has to look at because Brown is different than Stanford, is different than NYU, is different than Texas A&M. And so what matters for matching Brown students, nobody knows that better than Brown students. And so so we use a combination of things.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry, I beat you.
It's a race.
I just had a question, and sorry, it's a bit narcissistic, but was there anything in relation to how Brown students answered or some overall trends that you thought were different from other university students?
That's extremely interesting. The truth is we haven't looked at the full picture yet. We've looked at Brown on its own. From the results that I've seen so far, realistically, among top institutions, they sort of select from the same population. And so there are many things that are common about top institutions across the country. Yale is actually much more liberal than the rest of the Ivy League, for example, and Stanford is a little bit more conservative, which means merely left of the country than some other ones. But we have not yet done the full look at Brown. Brown is only 3 weeks old. So I'm excited to see what we find, though.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lauren. Interesting presentation. You mentioned that you worked in self-driving cars for a bit, and then at Microsoft, and now you're in the business of using data and tech to help people form human connections.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what has motivated you across these past few years to continue building and scaling up Marriage Pact when you could be doing something else?
That's an extremely fair question. I love asking the question, why are you here, to people all the time, including you guys. I mean, thank you for being here, by the way, right? Like I said at the beginning, there's so many different things you could do. And especially when you go to top university and you have many career paths ahead of you. Marriage Pact is just so fun. It's just so fun. And it, to some extent, has a very real-world impact. And so what better thing to do in your life than doing something fun, interesting, learning new things all the time and having an impact, especially a positive impact, I would hope, on other people. And so Marriage Pact, the problems that we talk about today, these are problems I could work on for the rest of my life. And they help me find meaning in life. Right? What's the purpose? In my mind, meaningful relationships is one of the most important things that contribute meaning to your life. And so if we could help people find those meaningful relationships and lead a better life than they would have otherwise, and we could do that for lots of people, what better thing to do? So I think I've worked on many things and I've found many things intellectually interesting, but I think this is something that I've found, oh wow, I'm passionate about this. So that's why.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll do one more question, and then I'll take the last question.
Thanks. Hello. You mentioned that there's a lot of knockoffs that happens over time. So I happen to have made a knockoff called the Op Match. So I'm the person who made the Op Match, and thank you. So instead of matching the closest person that you have similar values with, it finds the opposite.
Yeah.
And when I was making the questions, I was having trouble getting the right amount of questions for the current attention span for the current generation. So I was wondering, how did you find that balance between?
Yeah, that's so funny. Congratulations on the project, by the way. I hope people found their worst match.
They kept annoying me about posting the results, but I have midterms, so I couldn't do it.
That is extremely real. Yeah, it's funny. It's as much an art as a science, and there's a bunch of, we've studied this a lot, we've made apps, but there's sort of two things that are in tension. One is friction, of course, and just total attention span. And you have to make it as short and as easy to answer as possible. And the other thing, though, is that once people have decided to do something, they've kind of decided to do something, and they will tolerate actually a very long, flow, or onboarding flow is how people talk about the industry, if they have decided they're going to do something. And so there's some things in tension, but it's more of an art than a science, I think.
And one more really short question. So what algorithm did you use to match the similarity? Because for me, I had to rent a really big machine learning server to do this bipartite matching algorithm for the similarity thing.
Yeah, well, I can't tell you exactly how the algorithm is devised because that's a trade secret. But I would say we look at a few things. We look to maximize welfare in general. And I think really the secret is the data that goes in and makes it improve. Marriage Pact has has made real matches in the real world, and then has matched them, and then waited a year, and then we said, hey, how did you like your match? Steve, for example. And if a regular dating app asked that, everybody would say, who's Steve? But in Marriage Pact, you remember your match almost for the rest of your life in some cases. And so we have a data set you could spend $1 billion and you couldn't make the Marriage Pact data set. And so I think at the end of the day, asking the questions, doing the hard work of collecting the original data that has high signal to ultimately train your model, that's, I think, what distinguishes the Marriage Pact algorithm. But I'm happy to talk about it more afterwards.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take my prerogative as moderator to ask a professorial question to close it out before we go to the reception, which is, college is a special time, yes, and it can feel like a time that's hard to return to. Although, if you become a university professor, you get to be at college every day, so, it's a great career. But one question I have for you is if you just think about, your time in college now and both the things you do in your work, but maybe kind of the softer skills that you have to use as an entrepreneur too. Are there skills you wish you had gotten in college? Are there courses you wish you had taken? Obviously, data science as a discipline too is evolving, so there are things that one could learn now that one couldn't then. But yeah, I'm just curious if you think about the opportunity, what advice you would give to students in the room.
Gosh. Okay, I have two pieces of advice. One is sort of broccoli and the other is dessert. The broccoli bit of advice is that I underestimated, I always found math and computer science and these sort of formal techniques to solve problems. I'd always enjoyed them, and I enjoyed the process of solving a problem and learning a new way to solve problems. And I loved learning about algorithms, for example. Just how helpful those are to doing great original work, I completely underestimated. I thought they would be important. I had no idea. And so developing the hard skills, sometimes isn't as fun. And ultimately, I ended up focusing more on economics than I did on computer science. But boy, am I glad that I put in the work when I had nothing else in my life to do other than put in the work. Well, you have to go to parties and stuff like that. But realistically, you have a time now where you have no, rent obligations, serious ones, right? You have no job, you have no, many of you are single, it shows. So you have an opportunity, basically, to spend time in a way that nobody else could spend 4 years doing. And so in any case, acquiring those skills to help you solve interesting problems, I think is a really valuable use of time in college. The other thing, though, is that I would say I would allow room for serendipity. And if there's a class that you find just interesting, I would definitely implore you to take it. Because, for example, I was interested in art history at one time in high school. I took it, and it was my favorite class ever. And I was this close to majoring in art history in college. And I guess Marriage Pact might have not happened if I had. But it's a really lovely experience. And market design was off the beaten path completely. But it looked interesting, and I said, hey, what if we do this? Actually, I think behavioral economics was another one I did that I just loved. And so I would say allow room for serendipity and just follow some things that you love. And don't be overly focused on acquiring those hard skills because your parents told you to, or because society told you to, or because I told you to. Allow some room for serendipity as well. So those are maybe the two thoughts that I would have.
All right, well, let's thank Liam once again. And we have a reception outside. You can meet your platonic match. There's some food courtesy of the Data Science Institute. Thank you all for being here.
We will release matches in about 60 seconds. I'm gonna go initiate the drop. Here we go. So,